Well, I want a healthy, secure relationship where when we get into conflict, we're able to self regulate and we're able to co regulate with one another. We have the skills to be able to autonomically regulate ourselves. We have the skills to be able to communicate with empathy towards what each other wants and to be able to grow through conflict, not to fall apart and hurt one another through conflict. Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are, or if you're watching the replay. Welcome to another trigger-proof transmission. Now, I didn't expect that I would be coming on live, having this conversation. It kind of happened spur of the moment after I received an email last night, and it got me thinking all sorts of stuff. Um, and I really, really wanted to address this specific email because it I was caught off guard. It's not often that I get an email from somebody that really, like, look, I get a lot of DMs, and normally here's what they sound like. Dr. Nima, I saw your content. Help with a capital with exclamation marks. Help. I'm in a narcissistically abusive relationship. Help. When they say help, when all of a sudden, I'm just going to be very transparent with you. Whenever I see that, I go, help, with exclamation marks. It's a huge red flag for me. Because what that implies is that help, I need a rescuer. Basically, what happens is in the world of relationships, when we're working on healing relationships, often we are stuck in codependent patterns. And when we ask for help, it's not done from an empowered place where there's a fair exchange. Because fair exchange is a weird concept for human beings who are in codependent dynamics. There's usually either super duper entitlement, well, you're supposed to help me. You do these videos and I resonate with your videos, so you should fucking help me. And when we say no to someone, by the way, when you're dealing with cluster B personality types, which, a lot of people who come to our work, a lot of people who come into our work come from, some narcissistic kind of codependent cycles. So, we have to kind of put up boundaries. Not everybody's the right fit. And so when you tell somebody with a cluster B personality type, you tell somebody who has kind of narcissism in their history, you tell them no, just watch how they react. They become abusive. How dare you? You should be helping me. What? Because I don't have money, you're not going to help me? It's kind of like there's this unconscious covert explanation, this expectation that, oh, you make these great videos. You're like this fucking uh, what's the word I'm looking for? You're like this benevolent superhuman being that doesn't have a business and doesn't have expenses and doesn't have a team and doesn't invest a lot of money to put on these trainings and publish them. No, 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 no. You should help me. And so about 100, let's say 100 people apply to come and get receive my guidance and receive my training. Maybe 10% of them are actually genuine, looking to receive help, in that they have this underlying understanding that there's a fair exchange that's the only way that a healthy, solid, long-term relationship can work, which is ironically why they need the assistance in the first place, because they don't understand that. So we put a lot of boundaries up, and I honestly, I get tons of emails and DMs each day with people going, exclamation mark, help, help. And so the red flags go up, and within a few kind of moments of asking and prodding and kind of putting up boundaries and barriers, we see that they're not really looking for a fair exchange. They're looking to be rescued, and that's not what I do. So the deeper I go in my healing, the better I become able to say no to people. Before I used to say yes to everybody, and that's why helpers get burnout. Right, and so as I become more deeper in my own path, I'm not a guru, I'm not an academic or some sort of a published expert on narcissism and narcissistic abuse and abusive relationships. Um, I'm just a dude who's on a path, who's connected some major epic dots and learned exactly from a clinical standpoint, from a kind of like a grassroots level, how to heal from abusive relationships. And so the reason why I'm doing this training was because this person, I really felt her genuineness in this question. And she was even so understanding, and I could see that there was a sincere, genuine, by sincere and genuine kind of seeker, was like wasn't didn't come across as entitled, didn't come across as like, oh my God, rescue me. There was some level of insight that she was lacking, and she genuinely wanted. I'm going to read her email to you, and I'm going to. I was just so inspired. I emailed her back and I said, I'm going to do a Facebook Live transmission. She emailed me back. She said, oh my God, I thought you're a bot. Are you a real person? She's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. But yes, I'm a real person with feelings who has a gift to give humanity, but not everybody deserves to receive it. A lot of people can receive a lot of my guidance on free YouTube videos, but to get my time and my energy, there we demand fair exchange. And if that bothers you, please, just with one or two clicks, you can actually leave my entire universe, and I'm okay with that. I'm getting better and better with people not liking me because I choose not to rescue them without a fair exchange. But because your question was so on point, so she said, hi, I watched your YouTube video, Anatomy of a Toxic Relationship, which, by the way, I highly recommend. If you haven't watched it, go ahead on YouTube. Anatomy of a Toxic Relationship, a dissection, where I vulnerably go through my journey through healing from a toxic, codependent, abusive relationship to the place where I'm not a victim. I saw myself as a victim. I saw myself as the perpetrator. I saw myself as the rescuer, all of the above. And I've moved through the other side. And now I've broken that cycle and I have a healthy, secure, it's not perfect. We got into conflict. I mean, that's part of the dance of growth. But we now have a secure relationship, secure partnership, where we're parents. Now I have a 2-year-old. He's almost 2 at the recording of this, and our 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 relationship gets stronger through each conflict. Conflict doesn't mean shit gets broken in the house or windows or doors get, whatever. This is what me and my ex, she was, I had property damage because of her reactivity. I got physically abusive because of my reactivity. We had a abusive dynamic between the two of us. And I was it's never happened to me before, but in the healing of it, I had to kind of understand, why did it happen? How did it happen? What was my part in this? What was her part in it? Not to blame, not to shame, but to really understand. Kind of like if you see a fire that just burnt down your house, you don't go, well, that should never have happened. You actually go in and you investigate. That's what I did. I went and investigated with the goggles of the nervous system, with a lens of the nervous system, so that I could unpack why it happened, how I got there, and how to make sure that it never happens again. Because whether I was with this person or whether I was going to move on to another relationship, I never ever wanted it to escalate to the point where we were like emotionally or physically even hurting one another, right? And it's going to happen. I've said stuff, my wife has said stuff that's been hurtful, but we're able to address it, and our repair is a lot, I feel safer being able to communicate and have conflict because we know it doesn't escalate. And that wasn't available in my last relationship. And so I share my journey through that through it's like a 90-minute training. It's called Anatomy of a Toxic Relationship. I highly recommend you watch it. So I really wish I would have watched your video sooner because it was a huge eye opener for me, and I might not be in my current situation had I watched it sooner, right? I wish I watched that sooner. I wish I watched that training 10 years ago to learn from myself how I got myself in that situation. But I basically teach people how you got yourself in it, not to lay blame or fault, but to awaken you so that you can choose wiser. So for us to heal this, we have to. Well, let me finish her email. I'll try to keep this brief, but long story short, my husband and I have found ourselves in a toxic, abusive situation after 2 years of marriage, 4 years total relationship, and after knowing each other for over a decade. I could find every element you pointed out in your video in our marriage, from the testing each other to the narcissist abusing the other to see if they really love them, to the codependent blocking the exit so he can't leave. That was what my ex literally barricaded in front of the door when I'm like, get me the fuck out of here. She's like, no, you're not leaving. And so, I had to physically remove her from my path. This is where things get physical, right? Not to blame her or blame myself, but just to understand. Um, every element has been present in our marriage in one way or the other for the past 8 months. It got to the point that I moved out of our apartment a week ago. It's all fresh, very fresh. Um, a week ago, and I'm now living with a family friend. I believe this was the only way to help us both get clarity in our relationship and break our cycle of abuse, but now I'm afraid I've crossed a point of no return, and now our marriage is doomed to fail since I ran away. Okay? So it's like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have run away. I should have just stayed there in that toxic situation. First thing that I just wanted to point out. Interesting. I love my husband with all my heart, and I want our marriage to prevail. I recognize the role I've played in getting us to this point. Very mature enough for you to own your part. There's a class of third and fourth wave feminists, the radical feminists, who are like, no, it's just I'm blameless and it's only the other person's fault. But this shows not that you're not that you're taking the blame, but you're owning 100% of your 50%. You're now thinking in a way which is going to help you prevent this from happening again. If you are in a position of I'm the blameless victim, then there's a good chance that you're going to go through this cycle again because the lesson is repeated until it's learned. My ex had this happen to her several times, whereas in my case, this was the first time I ever got physically violent in my last relationship, But with her, it happened again and again and again. There's something to be said about that. We're talking in terms of a relationship is an energetic dynamic between two people, not fault, and I'm not abdicating my responsibility. I take full ownership of how I showed up. I'm just saying I'm also wise to understand how the dance goes. It's a dance between two highly wounded souls. I see where I've been I recognize the role I've played in getting us to this point. I see where I've been the codependent one who created the push-pull dynamic. I see where I have also brought abusiveness into our marriage. I see that it isn't just him, but both of us who brought us here. What I'm really curious to know is, have you seen couples and marriages survive this? Have you seen couples break this cycle and be able to return to their partner? Or do most people who find themselves in these cycles typically have to end their current relationship and find another partner? I really appreciate any advice you could give me on the matter, and this is what she says that really touched me. She said, if you have a Patreon or another way for me to support you and your organization financially, I would be happy to make a contribution for your time, since I know you probably get a lot of emails asking for advice. Thank you for taking the time to read my email. That's rare. Most people, first I want to tell you, just thank you for actually thinking that. And no, I don't expect any payment from you for this. But if you would like to donate to a charity of your choosing, please go ahead and do that in honor of this. I highly just want to say thank you. That demonstrates to me your sincerity and that you don't feel entitled. Entitlement is one of the red flags that we look for. That's a big red flag of I'm not wanting to work with this person. And in the world of toxic relationship dynamics, there's probably about 80% entitlement rate with the people who DM me. Can you just can you just get on a call with me? Entitlement is one of the um, red flags of narcissism. And so this is certain people just not a right fit because, the deeper I go with my own healing, the more boundaries I put around my energy. So I really feel inspired to share this. Number one, what I wanted to share is to answer this question, I wanted to invite you to understand, you know, it's really about finding the right question. The question you're asking is very sincere. It's like, this is where we are. Can we really heal from that? Can we save the marriage? Or if it got abusive like this, is it over? That's the wrong question because you do not want to save that marriage. You're now moved into your friend's place. It's only a week, right? The last thing that we would want is to save a marriage like that. So in order for you to the real question you want to ask is, what outcome do I want? Okay? When you have this question, can we save this marriage or are we doomed? Your first question, my invitation for anybody who can relate to this is to ask this question, what outcome do I want? Well, I want a healthy, secure relationship where when we get into conflict, we're able to self regulate and we're able to co regulate with one another. We have the skills to be able to autonomically regulate ourselves. We have the skills to be able to communicate with empathy towards what each other wants and to be able to grow through conflict, not to fall apart and hurt one another through conflict. Now, sometimes I'll get when people ask me questions, I'm like, so what's the outcome you want? And then they look at me like, or they just tell their story, and then I go, so do you have a question? They're like, I suppose I don't even know what my question is, because our inability to regulate our autonomic nervous system, we are in such a fight or flight state, which I use my little tools here to show you. I'm in sympathetic fight or flight state. My brain isn't working to understand what outcome. But to heal, we must activate our prefrontal cortex to come up with a solution. Should I stay? Should I go? The answer won't come when you're in sympathetic. When you're in sympathetic, you're running or you're fighting, or when you're what we call dorsal, that autonomic nervous system goes into shutdown. When we check out, we can't feel anything. So from those places of autonomic protection, our nervous systems are in protection mode. We can't make rational decisions. Our decisions are based on fear rather than love. Any decision that you've ever made that's based on fear, you've regretted. Any decision, even though it was difficult in your life, that you made it that was based on love, you could acknowledge that it was difficult, but you never regretted it. So, to answer, this is a really complicated question. The answer is you do not want to save that marriage. You want to create an outcome of an entirely new relationship. And your job is to completely go all in with that relationship where you feel, number one, you feel safe with yourself. You feel safe with one another. You have the ability to communicate back and forth. Hold on one second. I have a call here. I'm going to move Jeff. Can we push back? All right. Sorry, I just had to move my my next call. Sometimes I get into flow and I don't want to get interrupted, and I can't predict how long these are because I don't script them. I just take a few notes and I kind of gather my thoughts together, and then I answer your question as though I'm your big brother. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of hit a pause and really qualify what I'm saying, because you might not have ever met me before. Who the fuck is this guy talking? I'm not like a marriage counselor. I'm not an expert in narcissistic abuse. I've written no papers and journals. I'm not an academic or a scholar in this. I'm a chiropractor, and by training. And 2 years ago, or 5, 6 years ago, I had this vision that everybody was coming in with stress related problems to my practice, and I was helping them structurally, but I wasn't dealing with the root cause of what their problem was. And as I delved deeper, I realized that stress is the issue that's bringing them in. And as I went through my own experiences with divorce in 2012 and a string of about 8 or 9 failed relationships later, each one of them becoming just a little bit more amplified in toxicity until my last relationship with my former partner, where things got abusive and the police were involved, and it was like, whoa. Um, it was a wake up call for me to realize, okay, so what's going on? What just happened? And the revelations that I had from that experience, I hit the pause button in trying to help and rescue other people, because my superpower was into tuning into other people and helping them with their problems, but that was kind of part of my rescuer role. I stopped I stopped hiding behind that identity of Dr. Nima, who was this amazing sage on the stage who can entertain with rap songs and dancing and entertaining people and all that. And I realized that was just a kind of a mask that I was putting on to hide from my insecurities. And my insecurities really showed up in my relationship patterns, where I was the avoidant. And so after my last relationship, I put a pause on, and I didn't work. I didn't distract myself with anything for about 6 months. And I realized what the root cause of the root cause of the root cause was for all of our relationship patterns, all of our codependencies. And the root cause of the root cause, I know this sounds really, you know, um, kind of simplified and kind of like, oh, fuck, are you serious? Is it that serious? Is that we don't love ourselves. I didn't love myself. I didn't love myself enough to choose a partner based on um, truly seeing her and loving her. It was based on a transaction of what we could give one another, right? Because that's how love was done to me. And so the little boy inside of me, who was felt like I wasn't, good enough or worthy, would hide behind success and insecure attachments with codependent partners so that I could validate myself, right? And so I found myself in that cycle. And then with this abusiveness came up, I just had to really unpack and kind of like go in and go, where does it all come from? How did it happen? And if I can figure this out, can I then create a healthy relationship? And if I can do that, I want to change the world with it. So I left my chiropractic practice and I created the Cycle Breakers Collective, the Cycle Breakers Portal, the Cycle Breakers community, and the concept of trigger proof. I realized that no matter how much I was being activated and provoked, that my reaction was my responsibility, that I was messable with, even though I could argue that this person was mentally ill and was provoking and threatening me. And I could justify my reactions to completely having my identity, my business, my reputation threatened on an ongoing basis, kind of like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Um, I had to take ownership of why I was so easily messable with, right? And so, what causes somebody to become abusive? And I realized that this whole cycle, basically, it starts before you guys even meet one another. And it's called a trauma bond. A trauma bond is our compulsion to repeat this unconscious pattern from childhood, which has us looking for love in the form of a mother that wasn't available for us. And so the narcissist and the codependent role, which then create a spectrum all the way to narcissistic personality disorder, which is all a response to trauma, which is a spectrum from codependent all the way to borderline personality disorder. This is a spectrum of wounding, of trauma that starts in childhood with a child not really given permission to emerge and individuate as their own healthy sense of self, with a parent who is stuck in their own narcissistic codependent cycle. So the codependent mother, the codependent wife, classic example, the mom who's codependent to a narcissistic father, or vice versa, becomes the narcissistic mother who doesn't have the ability to see and feel and attune to the emotional needs of a child. And the child ends up with this wound where this deep need to connect with the mother, it's like essentially it's the matrix. The matrix means womb, right? So it's like the movie The Matrix, where deep down this deep wound from mother becomes what we actively seek to replenish, to fill that void with another person. So now you get into this role where the first phase of this role of the kind of narcissistically abusive type of relationship is this kind of bait. It's kind of like you strike a deal. The narcissist strikes a deal with the codependent. Both of them, neither of them love themselves. Both come from the same wound. Narcissism is a solution to the wound of not feeling seen by mother by creating this false sense of grandiosity. Codependency is the opposite solution to not feeling seen, is that I'm going to merge, I'm going to bend whoever I am and put whatever mask I can to be seen and heard and loved by this other person, usually. And so the narcissist and the codependent are a perfect twisted dance for one another. Okay, so this is where it begins. If you want to end the cycle, you got to go back to where it begins. It begins with a wounded child meeting another wounded child with the perfect kind of complementary wound. And so what happens is there's a covert contract that's made between the narcissist and the codependent. The narcissist begins with the love bombing. In that space is, you're the best, you're the greatest, you're so beautiful, I've never met anybody like you. And in that moment, the codependent, who deep down never felt seen, never felt heard, never felt loved by mother the way she deserved, all of a sudden feels a sense of unconditional love that she didn't receive from mother through the gaze of the narcissist. Okay, so what's happening is like, oh my God, I felt hopelessly in love. I'm so in love with this other person. You're actually in love with the idealized version of yourself. Consider the possibility it's not them that you've fallen in love with. It's the idealized version of yourself through the gaze of that other person. Essentially, they turn you into a narcissist. Oh my gosh, it's kind of like what Professor Sam Vaknin calls the Hall of Mirrors. Oh my God, I've fallen in love with the idealized version of myself. Because it's like and it's kind of like a co-pedestalization. Because the higher that I can place that person, the more sexy they are, the more beautiful, the more unbelievable they are, it means that I am too. So it's kind of like this covert contract of, I'm going to love you like your mother never did. And in return, here's the contract. You're going to love me like my mother never did. And you're going to prove to me that you love me by me becoming abusive to you. Because a true mother will never leave her child, regardless of how, a true loving mother would never leave her child regardless of how badly he behaves. So the abuse or the devaluation, abuse meaning kind of like a devaluing you, emotionally putting you down, cutting you down, that kind of thing, is an attempt for the narcissist who didn't properly individuate from his mother, still stuck. This is reason really what's happening is both of you are still seeking for the womb, safety in the womb. That's really the root cause of this toxic dynamic. You don't know it. You're just seeing it. Oh my God, I'm addicted to the other person. No, you're not. It's got nothing to do with the other person. It's that the safety and the mother, it's kind of like a dual mothership. Dual mothering is that you're going to be the mother that I never had, and in exchange I'm going to be the mother that you never had, and in exchange you're going to be the mother that I never had, so that I can fulfill this fantasy one day. Whatever fantasy it is, it really comes back to the real fantasy is going back into the womb when all your needs were met, where you felt totally safe and nestled into unconditional love, and you were fed without any effort. You didn't have any, confrontation. You didn't have to deal with not feeling love. It was just this cocoon that you were bathed in unconditional love. That's the matrix, the womb, which is very parallel with the movie The Matrix. And so to heal from toxic, abusive relationships, you ask the question, is a marriage salvageable? You don't want to return. What you're looking for is to return back to the womb. And if you do, because you're only a week out, what I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not saying because I'm kind of cutting you down, you're going to want to go back in. You're out. You're living for a week, but what you're secretly doing is hoping that he's going to come back to you, begging for you back, which he will, because you're his mother and he's your mother. It's like, I don't want to leave my mother. And so this is why it's so addictive. And so people who go, girl, he's a narcissist, run. God, stay away, stay far away, run the other way. What are you doing with this person? That's why when you see somebody else going through it and you're taking them out for coffee, you're face palming, going, God. You can easily give the other person advice because you're not emotionally engaged to the whole conversation and the whole dynamic. But when you're in it, it's highly addictive. Why? Because once you go through that cycle of abuse where there's love bombing, then the tensions build and the devaluation and the discard happens. You have the incident, right? And the tension builds. The incident happens because deep down inside, the narcissist badly wants to individuate from his mother. This is why I remember when I got married, the first time, I knew on my wedding day that I was going to eventually leave. It's so weird. I was kind of freaked out by it. But now I understand why. Because narcissism happens because of an inability to separate and individuate from mother at the age of 2, from a narcissistic mother. It's a form of trauma. So that's what I went through. I went through a trauma at the age of 2. Right? I was really had a blockage in separation individuation. I had a separation trauma at the age of 2. And so that was where my core wound is. Every time you have a narcissistic wounding, you regress to an infantile state in relationships. That's why the clients that come to us are like, man, I'm a CEO, I'm a badass at work, but in relationships I turn into a needy little kid. Hello? Exactly why it happens. It's neurological, it's neurobiological. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just unresolved trauma. So what ends up happening is we go through this little dance where the narcissist in the role, these are just roles, okay? And the borderline codependent is the other role, right? I'm not labeling people. I'm just seeing these are the roles. And you can heal from this depending on how far you've gone, how much trauma you've had, how much work and how committed you are in getting the right guidance. You can actually come back into balance, right? You can. You'll always have those parts to you, but you're able to work with them. You're able to manage them. You have healthy relationships again, or for the first time, because I never was able to before I did the work. So essentially what you're asking in your email is, can this be salvageable? And the answer is no. Like, when you go back without doing the work, you will repeat, guaranteed you will repeat the pattern. It's been a week. As his abandonment wounds come up, he's his this fear of abandonment comes up. He's, as the narcissist, he's going to come back love bombing again. Flowers, I'm so sorry, it's never going to happen again. Oh, you're the best thing. And then you're it's going to trigger the narcissist inside of you, and you're going to be like, oh, thank God I can return home to mom. That's really what your neurobiology is saying. Even though you're like, oh my God, we're going to make this work, I promise I'll never happen again. It's kind of like, you're it's like a mother who spanks her kids and loses it, and gets violent with the kid and goes, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, I promise I'll never do that again. Well, of course, rationality, after after the feelings have passed and your nervous system is back down to safety, you easily just say that. But in the moment of activation, when you go into fight or flight and you trigger his abandonment wound, or he triggers yours, and you regress to that infantile state, you now have two children, and two children, you've seen them play on the sandbox, they hit one another. This is what happens. You become like children. It's not a conscious thing. It will happen again without the work. The the real question is the real question you want to ask is, you know, do I really want to return to that marriage? That level of marriage? And of course you don't. What's the outcome that you want? I want a healthy, secure relationship. So to really answer your question, in order to have that secure relationship, you're going to have to do something that's pretty much mission impossible. Many of the experts say it's literally impossible. And it is impossible. I would think it's impossible to do alone. It's to give up the old relationship in service of this new one. To be more committed to the secure relationship rather than you are that specific person. That's not easy to do, but this has become my specialty. Have we been able to help people? Absolutely. But it took one person to basically go, okay, they're not willing to do the work. I'm doing this for me. You got to look at this as two unhealthy people. You're like, oh, should we do the work together? Most codependents will DM me and go, oh my gosh, but what if he doesn't want to do it? And I go, okay, look, pretend like you are two human beings who are unhealthy. Let's say you're both 300 pounds overweight, and you know that it's bringing you into your life is in danger. By the way, with trauma bonds, in a lot of cases, lives get lost because of it. People get sick or suicide or physically harming one another. It happens. So I really want you to get this is a life or death thing. And if you have kids, holy shit, this is exactly how it passes on to the next generation. You better make damn sure that you prioritize healing this unless you want it to pass down. I mean, look at your life. Look at what the safety and the container of your family system was like. See the codependency of your parents? Guess where you learned it. So it's not your fault, and it's not even your parents' fault. So we got to remove the whole fault and blame conversation and pointing fingers and throw that out the window, which is what I appreciated most about your email, because most, especially in the radical kind of feminist type of movement with the Me Too stuff, which is it's just all about just there's only one victim, and that's the woman. The woman is blameless, but this isn't to blame the victim. This is to say both parties have a responsibility. Not fault, not blame, but let's take ownership to heal. Why? Because we want the outcome to be a secure relationship. So you got to look at it as two unhealthy people who are both, let's say, 300 pounds overweight. My question to you is, do you need him or her, if you're on the other side, him or her, to lose the weight for you to take on the work of losing the weight? Is it conditional or dependent on them? Well, no, I want them to do the work too. Well, if you are 300 pounds overweight, what's the best way to get somebody to do their work? Is you lose the weight and you become a healthy individual and inspire, because a rising tide lifts all boats. And if you take on the healing work, which involves you really looking to individuate from your mother. So can the marriage be saved? Can you have a secure relationship? Not until you individuate from your mother. Not until you work at becoming a whole healthy human, which has got nothing to do with your partner, and realize the trauma bonding that this dynamic is repeating from your childhood. This is a familiar pattern. You are in a dance that isn't new. You are repeating compulsively, unconsciously, a dynamic that's very familiar from childhood. It's familiar, even though it's painful. If that's all you feel you deserve, or that's all that was modeled to you, then you're going to keep going back for more. You're going to keep going back. People say, why couldn't I leave? Why couldn't I leave this person? They're so bad for me. Is it Stockholm syndrome? And it's a trauma bond. A child doesn't leave their mother. I remember Johnny Depp was asked that when his trial is like, why didn't you leave? And his response was, well, my dad didn't. Well, his dad was in a trauma bond too. But the answer is, you don't leave your mother. There's an incredible amount of guilt involved in leaving. It's like, oh my gosh, because there's two parts. A, you don't leave your mother. And second, you see the child inside of them and you feel guilty but for hurting them. So it evokes guilt and shame, right? It's a double whammy. So you have a grief of a child that you're abandoning, and then the grief of losing a mother all over again. So that's why people who um, say, "Fuck, just leave." God, why are you stupid? Or they don't get the very toxically alluring and highly addictive nature of returning back to that person, which you will. It's only been a week. Guaranteed, if you don't have the right guidance, you will want to return, right? It's like, I'm an independent woman. I'm doing amazing. I'm going to take a stand and I'm moving forward. And every step that you move forward, it's kind of like you're losing a part of yourself. There's a huge amount of despair to break a trauma bond. People die when they try to break a trauma. It's not easy. You will go back. That's why people go back 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And, because it's kind of like it's your old identity. You don't know who you are outside of that identity, right? So can it heal? Can the marriage be salvaged? Do not ask that question. You do not want that marriage to be salvaged. If you want that healthy relationship, you got to ask the question, who do I have to become? Well, I got to be the type of person who's not going to who completely is compassionate towards themselves and understanding towards the other person, but not available for anything other than being treated with respect, the same respect that you're treating you. Right? And that's when we become magnetic. So when you step up and say, to hell with that other person if they're going to do the work or not, I'm going to heal what this is all about, one of two things are going to happen. You will rise. You will ascend, which is scary to the codependent. That's why, many people, I know that there's several people watching who've been following who know what they have to do, but they're afraid to do the work. One of my clients actually, she was very honest. She goes, I know what I have to do, but I know that if I do the work, I'm going to lose him. Oh, really? How do you know that? I just know that I'm going to outgrow him and I'm terrified, so I'm just not going to do it. I'm like, shit, that was honest. It's sad for me to hear. That's like saying I'm 300 pounds overweight and I know that if I lose weight, I'm going to want to move on. So I'm just going to stay where I'm at. And I'm like, geez, that's a trauma bond for you, hey? We are bonded to our trauma, right? And so those people, you can't rescue them. They're looking to be rescued and they're just going to keep that. This work is for people who are like, all right, for my child. This is a big one. This is for my kid. I wouldn't do it for me, but I don't want my kid to go through the same thing. I'm ready to become a cycle breaker because this didn't start with me, but it can end with me. And I'm going to lose the weight emotionally. It's figure of speech. I'm going to heal from my bonds to those unresolved attachment wounds. I'm going to do it. And in so doing, one of two things will happen. You will rise, you will ascend, and that person will do one of two things. They will realize, like in one of our clients, Pamela, in one of those cases was like, holy shit, I'm going to lose this person. I'm going to get my act together. and actually do their work. And she held her ground. She didn't, because there's one there, you know, it's an easy manipulation for him to go, oh baby, I'm gonna get therapy. I'm gonna go to a counselor to fix this, right? And you're like, oh, he's getting counseling. I'm gonna move back in. Classic mistake. Because when you truly do the work, you get to a place where you say, oh, I'm not going to, I'm not gonna take anything. Uh, hold on. Uh, I'm not gonna take anything other than this, how you treat me. How you're treating me, I'm not going to take anything up below here. And I got to see this, and this. You got to learn this skills. And so the only way that you could salvage a secure relationship in general is to salvage the relationship with you. You've abandoned yourself. You have conditioned to abandon. You've been conditioned to abandon yourself. So chances are you're going to do it again, maybe a few more cycles before the wake up call happens, where you're like, that's it. I'm going to heal what this is really about. One of two things will happen. He will either rise to join you, or he's going to fall away, and then you will meet somebody who's at your level. And that's terrifying. You're going to have to go through various stages. You're going to have to go through grief. This is why people don't leave trauma bonds, because the grief of losing the mother, this person they idealize, that they're looking for, that love bombing person that they finally loved themselves through, that treated them the way the mother never did. I'm just chasing the dragon again. I'm chasing that high, you know? You have to grieve the loss of that fantasy. And that is like losing your mother. It's like, and then there's the grieving the loss of yourself. You know, who am I? Because you're going to grieve. You're like, my whole identity was involved in being a slave to this cult called this relationship. Leaving that cult, which we help people leave cults too. It's traumatic. This person is now, who am I? So you're grieving the loss of yourself. So despair is an actual necessary part of breaking the trauma bond. So when we work with people and they first start going through the process, the first 6 weeks of it, they actually feel worse. They're like, what the fuck? I came into this to feel better. I actually feel worse. But what they don't realize is the grieving and the despair is like a junkie. You're a junkie that's kind of detoxing from a heroin addiction. And what happens to a junkie who's detoxing? They feel worse initially. Healing from a trauma bond is exactly the same as recovery from an addiction. That's why to think that you can do this on your own, or to think that you can do this through talk therapy, is a fantasy. You've got to commit wholeheartedly to rescuing yourself. And you got to embrace the grief of losing your mother that you thought that this person was. The grief and the shame and the guilt, oh my God, of leaving this poor wounded child that you have such a bleeding heart for, because, oh, you see the wounded part in him and I'm just going to go rescue him. So it's a double grief, double grieving, losing a child and losing a mother at the same time, right? And then there's a despair with that. And then there is an overcoming the narcissistic supply that they gave you, the validation, the sexual validation. My friend, this is not an easy task, but I did it. I did it. I went through all of it, the grief, the despair, and it takes one real important trait, which we're looking for in the students that are coming into our Cycle Breakers program, is humility. It's one thing very lacking, because our narcissistic grandiose self is, oh, I'm really amazed. I've done all this work. I've done, like, we hear this, we see the applications and we see the red flags and we're like, nope, Nope, nope. We're looking for the sincere ones who are truly ready to break free, to break that cycle, and then create secure relationships. Sometimes with the partners that they were able to let go of in service of that vision. They rose up to meet them. And sometimes that person was let go, but we let go with an open heart. You're not reactively letting go, because that's not a genuine letting go if you're doing it reactively. But to truly say, I'm ready to let go of the old self, of the old self, of the old relationship, to go after this unknown. And that's the scariest part, because we want to hold on. And when we're holding on, we can't receive. And so the only way that you're going to be able to have a healthy relationship, that I was able to have a healthy relationship, is by letting go of what I was holding on to. And when I let go, my hands were open and I received a beautiful, secure, healthy relationship. I want to say thank you for you for being so brave to send me that email. Hopefully this was helpful. Can it be salvaged? The answer is you don't want that relationship to be salvaged. Can you be salvaged is the question. Can you find your authentic self? This is a spiritual hero's journey. So you really want to make sure that you're not going it alone. You must have a guide who knows what the fuck they're talking about, who isn't just going to sit there and listen to your victim story and validate your victim story and say, oh, poor you, you're the victim of narcissistic abuse. Of course, it's important that you get your story validated and understood, but now what? If you're still 2 years going to the same support groups of victims, narcissistic abuse support group, and you're still being peddled that shit, you are now being poisoned by covert narcissists, keeping you stuck in victimhood. And my invitation for you is to go beyond victim into beyond the survivor label. Okay, go from survivor to thriver to, okay, it didn't happen to me, it happened through me. I'm above, I've transcended it. I love myself. I love who I've become. I have purpose now. I let go of that old relationship in service of receiving a healthy one. Let me know what came up for you in this share. I'm going to do more transmissions on this. What came up for you? Share. Send me a DM. If you're ready, I'm gonna send you. I'm gonna put a link down there. There's an application. Now we've gotten really good. There's three things that we look for in people who are ready to be cycle breakers and receive my guidance in it, helping people through. There's 3 yeses that I look for now, because we can't help everybody. It's a certain type of person, and many applications are denied. Number 1, are you ready to be a cycle breaker? Because this didn't start with you. My friend who wrote the email to me, it didn't start with you. It's not your fault. It's no one to blame here, right? At first you blame them, then you blame yourself, and then when you really do the work, you realize there's no blame. It's just a cycle I found myself in. I'm ready to be a cycle breaker. Step 1, are you ready to be a cycle breaker, regardless if it's with me or you're being guided or you by somebody else? Doesn't matter. That's what I look for, is that they're really seeking to become a cycle breaker, number 1. Number 2, are you wanting to be guided by me? If those 2 are a yes, then number 3, are you important enough as your own child to invest in high quality training? To invest in yourself, to put the resources together, to make yourself a priority. Because most of the people in that codependent stage, they're like, help! And I'm like, okay, great, let's do the training. Oh, let me ask my husband. It's like, oh, there is so much disempowerment. They don't have a job. They don't have any savings. They don't have a career of their own. They're completely in a place of disempowerment. They're looking to be rescued. What's going to happen is you're just going to go from one codependent relationship to the other. You got to have some level of resources, inner or outer, and resilience to be able to handle this level of work, because you're going to have to go through. You have to be humble enough to receive guidance. You got to be resilient enough to acknowledge that this is going to be a lot of grief and pain. And number 3, that you're willing to surrender to the fact that when you start walking away, you're going to feel like you're losing an arm. and it's going to feel like despair. You're literally, but on the other side of that is a true, strong, self-loving individual who has a purpose in their lives. And I'm telling you, from going through the process, it's not pretty the first 4 to 6 weeks, but you don't have to do it alone.
Make sure you subscribe.
But nobody can do it for you. My invitation, if those 3 are yeses, send me a DM. Tell me your backstory. I'll send you a link, and we'll see you at the next perfect time.